All right. I'm gonna post. Jason, as a warning, I think you are now like in my speaker view. You're like famous now.
In your screen?
Yeah, in my screen.
That's all that matters to me.
You're the welcoming face of this entire event. All right. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. Welcome. Good morning. I keep putting it back to speaker view and it's just Jason, which is hilarious. Apparently, Jason, you will be speaking and leading us in this conversation this morning. No pressure.
Am I accidentally pinned or something? Is that what it is?
No, no, I have no idea why when I put speaker, you just keep coming up even though I'm talking, but we'll get there at some point. I'll put it back to gallery so the pressure's off you. just to get that out of there. All right. All right, we'll give folks a few minutes to join us this morning. Welcome. Feel free to introduce yourselves if you'd like in the chat. We have a lot of folks registered. I want to also let you know that we are recording this because we know a lot of folks are not going to be able to join us possibly during the event, and we want to make sure that people are able to come and see it after the event. So we are going to make this event available. We will make this available afterwards. It turns out I am not good at talking and admitting people. I don't understand how people can do that. As you can tell, I am not a parent who is good at multitasking. I'm going to see if when I go back, nope, going back to speaker view is not working, Chari. Chari, why don't you say something and let's see what happens.
Okay, I'm here. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Did that work for you? Yeah? Okay, good.
This is good. That's wonderful.
Fantastic.
That's good. All right. Welcome, everyone. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're from, your role, who you are, and what you're excited about learning today. All right. I also, for those of you who are just joining us, I wanted to let you know that we are recording today's session, and that way we'll be able to make it available to people who are not able to be here live. And there's a lot of interest in this topic this morning. It's very timely, and so we want to make sure that folks who are not able to be here are still able to get the information. All right. Thank you for understanding that some of us are not great at Zoom multitasking. It has never been even multiple years into this is just not something that I am excellent at. That is great. I'm really excited to see so many different people who are coming from so many areas, geographic areas, but also folks who are coming from different sectors, as well as housing specialists. So thank you. All right. So I'm going to give it a couple more. Oh, wonderful. It looks like we have some folks who know our guest speakers today from Portland Homeless Family Solutions. And I'm going to give you a little bit of gallery view here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Fay, now we've got you on speaker view. I don't understand how this all works, but Chari, I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you all. Again, my name is Kari Green, and I will help to kind of monitor the chat today and just be here to help support the session. I am a member of the Oregon Program Evaluators Network, and we are really pleased to have our three speakers here today. Chari Smith has been a longtime member of Oregon Program Evaluators Network. And so we're really pleased that Chari is bringing her two colleagues here today. Brandi Tuck is the executive director of Portland Homeless Family Solutions, and Fay Schuler is the program director at Portland Homeless Family Solutions. You may have seen them. They've been in the news. They have been doing a lot of incredible work in our region, so it's a real honor to have them here today. Chari Smith is the president of Evaluation into Action and an author of nonprofit program Evaluation Made Simple. I will put a link in the chat later for the book. Get your data, show your impact, improve your programs. Everybody needs a sassy subtitle when they put a book out, right? So I'm going to put their information in the chat. And again, if you would like to introduce yourself in the chat, please feel free so we know who you are. Once again, we are recording this session, so we're able to share it with the folks who aren't able to be here live. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleagues. I think Brandi is going to get us started.
Well, hi, Kari. Thanks so much for having us today and for introducing and for monitoring the session and making sure everything is going smoothly. Chari Smith with Evaluation into Action. And I think what I'm going to do first is turn it to Brandi so she can just give you an overview of their organization.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you. I am Brandi Tuck, and for the last 15 years, I've been the executive director of Portland Homeless Family Solutions. Our mission is to empower homeless families with children to get back into housing and stay there. We operate a few main programs. Our first program, one of our most upstream programs, is homeless prevention, preventing homelessness before it even starts by helping families during times of emergencies with financial help, paying rent, paying utilities, helping with the car payment, whatever it might be, so that we can prevent homelessness, keep people in their homes, and avoid the crisis and stress of homelessness. And also it is a way more cost-effective program. We can talk about how we know that from our data evaluation. And so then we also run for families that do end up experiencing homelessness. We run a rapid rehousing program that helps families move quickly from homelessness back into housing. We provide case management and financial assistance for around a year or so, and then follow up with families long-term to make sure that they keep their housing long-term. 88% of the families in our programs keep their housing long-term, and we provide a lot of wraparound supports, case management, service navigation to all these folks. We also have some economic empowerment programs that are really meant to help end poverty and help people move from just surviving to thriving. We have a cash transfer program where we are giving cash to a handful of families as a pilot program over the course of 2 years to show that the most effective way to end poverty is by giving people cash and letting them use it to manage their lives. And finally, we have our shelter program. We have an emergency shelter for up to 18 homeless families with children at a time. It's called Family Village. It's in Southeast Portland, and it's the first shelter of its kind in Oregon, built using trauma-informed design and architecture, which is shown to help families heal from the crisis and trauma of homelessness and can lead to better outcomes, like getting through shelter faster, getting into housing, and being able to keep that housing long-term. So that is us. Every year we serve around 300 or 350 families. It's about 1,000 kids and parents. And our goal is to continue to scale up our programs to serve more and more families. So with that, I think, Chari, is there anything else you want me to add?
I don't think so. I think it'll all come up organically, and these questions we're going to be kind of talking through. We'll get through as much as we can in the time we have today. Thanks for that overview, Brandi. I wanted to give a little bit of history. Brandi and I, we worked together in 2013, and the focus of the program evaluation process is on your shelter program. As an evaluator, I really feel like it's important to just focus on one program, build capacity with the team, and then you can scale it out to other programs, which, as you'll hear, Brandi and her team have done beautifully. So it's really exciting to be here and talk about that. So the program we're going to actually talk about is that program evaluation that we set up back in 2013 and how it has evolved over time. So, I'm going to just open it up back to you, Brandi, around like what made you decide back in 2013 to set up a formal program evaluation process for your shelter program?
Yeah, so there were a few main things. Number one, we wanted to be able to tell if our programs were working, if our shelter was working, if we were meeting the needs of the families, if we were providing the right services, if we had the right model. And so we really wanted to know feedback about whether the things we were doing were making changes and having impacts in the lives of the families that we were serving. Mm-hmm. We also we wanted to make sure that we were best serving them. And we also wanted to be able to tell our story. We were a very, very small nonprofit at that time. I kept hearing all over the place, you got to have a good evaluation program. And I didn't really know what that meant. And so we weren't raising a lot of money. We were very small and kind of new. So I really wanted to be able to tell our story to the community, to funders, to foundations, to donors, at our annual event, anywhere that we could, to be able to get our message out there that we were having an impact in the lives of the families that we were serving. And so you should support our work because of that.
That is beautiful. And I think that, when we first met, and that's, I think, pretty much what you said, I got very excited because you really led with, we want to learn. We want to know what's working and what's not working. And if we can also demonstrate impact, that's great too. But I also come from the school of thought of leading with like what's working and what's not working, so we can have data to make decisions with and move forward from there. So when we did the deep dive into setting up your program evaluation process for the shelter program, I do three things as an evaluator when I start working with a new program, or new to me, I should say. It's not a new program. It wasn't a new program, but new to me. I first do a deep document analysis to see what you've written down in terms of what the program does and the change it's expected to make. And so when I did that for the shelter program, I saw there was a lot written about getting families housed. That was clearly your goal. And there were a lot of things that you did to get to that goal: life skills classes, case management, all these great wraparound services, right? And so I looked at what are you doing, and then what difference are you expecting to make? And that typically will live in grant proposals, right? So it's like written down, what do you have going on? How can I start to sketch out what the shelter program is all about before I start talking to everybody on your staff and move in that direction? Which brings me to the second piece of the process, right? I do a survey with all staff and any other key stakeholders that will be involved with the evaluation planning process. The survey is really simple. It's really, what is your role? What do you think the goal is for this program? What activities are you doing to achieve that goal? And what impact do you think this program is having on the participants? And by looking at what the documents say and what staff are saying, we look at melding that together so we have a clear document that really articulates what your program does and the difference it's expected to make. And the third final piece that we did together to really create that evaluation plan, that written document that literally brings everybody to the same page, is that we did an evaluation planning session. So that included all the staff that completed the staff survey. And it also, I think you had at least 2 board members that participated, right, in that session?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that session is a whirlwind of 2 hours of I talk very little. I give like an overview of the process and what I had found so far, and then facilitating small group activities. We're ultimately at the end of that 2 hours, I have everything I need to write your evaluation plan. So by the end of that, we had come to consensus on the program goal, which was already articulated, right? You wanted to see families get housed, what activities you were doing to reach that goal. And I have that actually in the book. I have it marked where we really felt like they fell in 3 areas: physical, emotional, and cognitive. And then finally, really, what were your measurable outcomes? Because that drives the direction of what data you're going to gather. So that's how we put together that program evaluation plan. And I'm curious, Brandi, if you could speak to what the process was like for your team.
Yeah, I think what I remember, it was a long time ago, it was nearly 10 years ago now, but what I remember about it a lot was the collaboration. I feel like it was really a collaboration between us and Chari, and by us, I mean our whole organization. I mean, we had got feedback from our staff, from our board, from our families. It was like this really collaborative, inclusive process where it wasn't just like me and Chari like coming up with what the things were. It was, I mean, at that time, we had only like 10 or 12 staff. I think it was the whole staff participated in this. And I think that was really valuable because it really gives you that perspective of the people that are closest to the work, that are seeing the families every day, that are making the changes, and that can really give the most helpful and meaningful feedback in terms of what are we trying to accomplish, what's realistic, like, because I've heard a lot of feedback over the years of like, the leadership will say something and then the direct service staff are like, that's not possible, and so really trying to be in alignment with each other so that whatever we were doing, the staff was like, yes, this is a co-created process that we can really get behind. And so we did lots of digging deep on what kind of change we wanted to see. We looked at what we could quantify, and then we also looked at what we could like get qualitative data about, and how we could get information about like the emotional changes that families have gone through, or like what they're, are they more connected to their community or less connected to their community? Do they feel better off or worse off? Like, and really trying to get at how we were changing the families, and thinking about what measurements we could use to get that information. We created, Chari then helped us create the tools and the client surveys and everything that we used. And it turned out, it's so interesting. I look back on it, and it was this, great process that was really inclusive, but I guess I expected to go through a program evaluation process and come out of it with like 13 pages of data that we're going to be tracking and outcomes we're going to be measuring and like all of this technical stuff. And it was actually really short, right? Like we just had a handful of outcomes we were tracking. Like I expected to have like 13 or 15 bulleted lists in our grant proposals. And I think we usually have like 4 or 5 at the most for our outcomes and our outputs that we're trying to make changes on. And so it really like simplified it to a really digestible way that both the families, the staff, and the community could really like get a hold of.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because I generally recommend 3 to 6 outcomes, maybe 7 or 8 at the most, because I think that's manageable to measure, and you want to look at a collaborative process on what are those going to be. Because like you said, Brandi, if it was just you and me, that changes the dynamic then on how staff are engaged with actually gathering the data. And that's something that I've learned as an evaluator, that it's really important to be collaborative, to partner. Like one of my mantras is that I'm the evaluation guide and you're the content experts. And I think that's really important in terms of building buy-in and making sure the data are being gathered and that what we're gathering is actually realistic, together, right? So we wouldn't want to have 13, 14, 15 outcomes that are super technical, that feel like they live in an ivory tower, that staff are like, I have no connection to these. And it's like something on their checklist that they have to gather in order to be able to report out to funders. And there's just, it's like, when my kids were little, like, eat your vegetables. Like, I don't like them. Why should I eat my vegetables? I mean, it's like, there has to be buy-in, there has to be education, because your vegetables are good for you. You should eat them. So that kind of a thing I think is really important. Before we kind of bring it to current day, I want it, because Fay is here, and I know Fay, you came on more recently, so I want to make sure we talk about what's happening today. I did want to highlight one piece that I really, I thought it was just such a great process. And again, I won't remember it. I don't have it memorized. And I'm going to put it here in the book, because Brandi's team is one of 4 organizations that's included in this book. And in looking at your implementation process, right, and that all of the different families that move through your programs, particularly in the shelter program, the families at that time, I don't know if this is still true, so you could tell me, they met with the case managers weekly. I don't know if that's still the case. Weekly? Yeah. So one of the things that struck me was how all the case managers kept notes differently, which makes sense. It's like everybody has their own style of keeping notes to, for the continuity of their services with that family. But since the goal was to get families housed, then how are you tracking over time to see if someone's about to disengage, what are the services that can help them achieve that goal? So to standardize that piece, we created this housing status scale, that every time a case manager meets with a family, they complete the scale and it goes into your database. And I'm just going to read it to you. So the housing status scale has 5 categories. I had to count them. Okay, so the first is not started, applying for housing, secured housing but have not moved in, housed, or disengaged. So my understanding of how that's been used over time then is you run these reports when you have a staff meeting. And now you could see, this family has been in the applying for housing category for like a month. Let's focus on that, figure out why they're not moving to securing housing. So it's an opportunity to use data to understand what kinds of services people are needing to move to getting housed. So I'd open it up, Brandi or Fay, like, how is that working today?
Yeah, so I mean, we continue to use this housing status check, and it's evolved over the years. And it's less about where they are in the housing process now, and we use it more now for whenever families move into housing to monitor whether they're staying housed, what their income levels are, what their sense of like belonging to the community is, their sense of isolation. And so we can, we used to use the housing status checker quite a bit. And then over the years, we really, I think one of the things we found is that it's hard sometimes to keep up with that level of data, with the staff. And so I think that as it's evolved over the decade, now it's really become this tool, not so much for in the housing process, because that happens so fast these days. It used to take a long, long time to get families housed. Families were in shelter for a very long time. And because of that, we would see these outcomes. We would see like, the lengths of stay of families, these outputs, we would know that the length of stay is going up. And so what do we need to do to decrease that length of stay? So we changed our programming to be able to decrease the amount of time that families stay in shelter. And so now they have a housing case manager and a shelter navigator that are meeting with them like daily. It's even more than weekly. It's like constant check-ins. It's a lot of engagement. And so now we really use that housing status check-in for like checking to see, is this family housed? Are they like precariously housed? What kind of housing are they in? How's their income changing over time? And so we can go into a family and look over the last, if we've been working with them for a year or 2 years or whatever, and see the changes in their income, see the changes in their housing stability, whether they're, in permanent housing or they're in a shelter or they've gone into a permanent supportive housing or a public housing or an affordable housing. So we can kind of see these changes over time in the families' lives.
And I love that, because that goes back to like the reason that you wanted to do program evaluation in the first place, right? The first thing you said is, we want to know if our program is working. Are they meeting our needs? And so it sounds you've expanded and changed that scale in such a way that you are looking at data on a regular basis to understand how to best serve the families.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, today Fay is our program director, and she has been with us for a little over a year, almost a year and a half. But before us, she ran another shelter for a long, long while, almost a decade and a half, and has done lots and lots of program evaluation on her own programs, but now also here at PHFS. So Fay, I would turn it over to you to share how else we use our program evaluation at PHFS and what you've done other places as well.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, so I came from a history of really complicated data tracking, federal, state, local, really tracking data that wasn't meaningful to our team, that wasn't meaningful to the people that we served. It was, being in the work for about 25 years, just seeing things shift and based on priorities of funders, government sources. So it's been so refreshing to be here at PHFS and really focus on what is meaningful to the team. Why do folks work here? What are the objectives they hope to get in their work and employment with PHFS? What do families hope to glean from our services, and really focusing on that rather than a lot of the terms that I think get thrown around in social work and a lot of the requirements that really dictate our work, but isn't meaningful to families and those we serve. So it's just been really wonderful to do that. I know that since coming here, we have really focused on we have this beautiful, gorgeous trauma-informed space and shelter, and really implementing both trauma-informed space and but also services. And so really making that apparent to the families from day one, from the first time that we talk to them. And so all of our services are trauma-informed and assertive engagement. We went through recently a complete overhaul of our handbook, and we've made it much more participant-centered, really easy to digest, very clear about what expectations are, and really making those expectations fewer and really around safety. And that has really changed how we engage with families. It's made our work so much more relationship-based and so much deeper, which is also more complex. But we're really able to work with each family individually and uniquely towards their goals and what they say is like the meaningful outcome that they want. Mm-hmm. And so using the trauma-informed approach, where like from day one, we are building that relationship with folks based on what they need. Also we're all trained in assertive engagement. And so that really kind of looks at how we do our work. How do we break down barriers? How do we meet people where they're at? How do we really try to set folks up to succeed in meaningful ways to them? Has dramatically changed the way we've been able to do shelter. We went from, stays that were about 120 days. And last year we averaged an 86-day stay with the majority, all but one family, moving into shelter during a 6-month period. And so we really saw how we started engagement from the beginning, how we started relationship building from the beginning, how we had really clear, and transparent expectations, very simplified. And really, we were just meeting folks where they were at. We also have a housing team that overlays our current shelter team. So right from the beginning, we're working with folks to support them in the trauma of experiencing homelessness. There's so much intersectionality of what folks are experiencing. And so we're helping them, have a successful stay at Family Village here, because shelter is hard. But on top of that, we have housing specialists who come in and their whole job is housing. And so we're talking about it from day one. And what we've been able to do is reduce the shelter stay, which also, for some people, shelter can be wonderful. It can be a beautiful experience. For other people, it can be traumatic. And so we want to reduce that stay. We want to open up the beds. And so rather than making more shelter, what we've been able to see by using this model is that people actually come into shelter, they leave quicker, we're able to serve more folks, but we're not creating more shelter while we do so. And we're able to really guide, what they want to do. And rather than a set outcomes that someone else is putting on them in their journey.
Fay, that's fantastic. And I really love how you spoke to that, creating the individual outcomes for them as they come in, and that collaborative, that partnership is really empowering. I know that, I think it was last month, we all met to talk about what we're going to talk about. And Fay, one of the things you shared was how you share the data with staff in terms of a staff morale. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that relationship between the staff and how you're using the data in that capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been, and I've worked, we also have a wonderful, well-resourced team here. So I think that really helps to be able to do the work, is to look at your organizational structure and make sure that you don't have folks who are doing multiple jobs, and it's a healthy balance. So we have these wonderful shelter managers, and together we gather information about lengths of stay, outcomes, where people are going, narrative information, and we bring that back to the team. And it's so easy to be on the ground, especially during the pandemic, especially when you're working with folks experiencing trauma, when you're working with folks experiencing homelessness, and all the different things that we do. It's very easy to think that we're not making a difference. And it's very easy to get kind of stuck in the hard situations. And so being able to kind of pull out, you're like, wow, this is what we did last quarter. Like, because that's why the information is important. It's not that important, or I don't think it's that meaningful to the city or to whoever. I think it's meaningful to the staff. They really want to feel empowered, like they're making a difference. Yes, the work is hard, but when I pull back, I can see, oh, this is what we're doing together as a collective. And so often do that, together. We pull the data, we share it quarterly, annually, at meetings, also share a lot of narrative. I love the open-ended questions. One thing that I've done throughout the years is really also use data to shift on what work we're doing, right? We see the needs of the community change all the time. And with data, we're hearing from folks like, what do you wish we had? What could have you have used? What resource wasn't there in the community? And so that data also helps us as a team strategize, like, oh, okay, where do we want to go as we're moving forward? What are our priorities? So yeah, I think it's great. It's wonderful to reflect that back to the team. I think sometimes we do these narrative reports. They go to the funders. No one ever sees them again. We put them on, we don't put them on a shelf anymore. They're on a drive somewhere, but we don't share it back to the good work of the folks who are doing it every day. And we need it right now.
Fay, I think that's a beautiful and empowering way to use data in terms of not just sharing it out with your participants, but also, and not just using it like, here's what we're doing, and using the data for program planning and decision making, but also as a way to reflect back to staff the difference that is being made. It's really taking a pause and some reflection time to really sit in that, because like you said, the work is hard. And so I think that's an incredibly powerful way to use the data to really reflect back to staff of, this is the difference we're making. I know this day may feel really hard, but if you step back and pause and reflect, that's a beautiful way to use data. I want to actually shift to a different. Go ahead.
So one of the beautiful things that Fay and the program managers of all of our different teams that she leads, they'll send these emails out to the whole staff of like, hey, you all, just want to let you know, in the last quarter, we served this many families, like 100% of them moved into housing. Oh my gosh, so good. And then this so it's an email to the whole staff, and then everyone chimes in and it's like, oh my gosh, you all are awesome. This is so good. We're making such a difference. Go team. And like, it really does boost this morale to like get these emails of just like, here's our data.
Yeah, here it is. Here's FYI, here's the report, please see attachment. And but to really get into the data and to really celebrate it. And I love that everyone's chiming in and talking about it. I think that is a great way to use the data to lift everybody up and to celebrate the successes. That's fantastic. Speaking of ways to use data and celebrate successes, I know one of the things when Brandi and I met in 2019, when I was doing the research to develop the book, I asked you, Brandi, how it's impacted your fundraising capacity over the years. And what you told me absolutely knocked me off my seat. And so I'm just going to read it straight from the book. It's because of having this program evaluation system in place, our annual fundraising from foundations increased by 600 and 77%, and annual fundraising from individual donors increased by 753%. Now that was back in 2019, so I don't know where it's at now, but my jaw dropped when you said that. I'm like, what? So can you speak to a little bit, like, how did program evaluation change your fundraising capacity to those incredible numbers?
Yeah, you know, and what's wild is today I was trying to do this and I did it like 15 times today, and I feel like it's wrong, but I think it's right. I think it's 2,000% increase now. We were making about, you know, $63,000 a year from individual donations, and we were making $38,000 a year from foundations, and we were making $25,000 a year from our annual event. And so we, you know, they were small numbers, and it was a huge part of our budget then still, and it felt big to us then. And today we're raising $1.5 million from individuals and nearly $500,000 a year from foundations. And so it's just, I mean, it's astronomical. And so I think the way that the program evaluation data has helped that is that because we have this very simple, like I said earlier, this very simple, this concrete, like well-planned and executed system of showing our results, that people can really identify with it, and we can lay it out. Here's the number of people we've helped, here's how many have gotten into housing, here's their long-term success, here is how their behavior has changed, is how their emotions have changed. That's really, really compelling to people. So we are able to we started using our data in our annual reports, and I think there's a link somewhere that we're going to share to the PHFS annual report, but we really just use infographics to share all of our info, and people can really, really identify with it and see how many people we're helping and what the change that we're making is. With the foundation side of things, you know, there's always that question of what are your outcomes? And for a long while, I was a little bit, I'll be honest, I was a little bit worried that we didn't have enough. That just these couple little outcomes, you know, these measurements that we were taking, I was worried that it wasn't going to be effective enough for foundations, because again, I had this assumption that program evaluation had to be this lengthy and technical and really like standard deviations and all that stuff. Like, I don't know what I thought, but I thought it was way more than this. And so I think because it's so simple and streamlined that it's really easy and effective to be able to show our outcomes. Grant reporting is really easy because we just go and pull our numbers, pull our data, pull the quantitative and qualitative. We have these, you know, quarterly things that the staff are putting together with all the narratives and the stories and the challenges and the successes. And so it makes it really easy to compile these reports and to be able to show this qualitative, quantitative data and this narrative, these open-ended questions in these surveys that we ask, and just giving people the opportunity to share their experiences and what has affected them.
Brandi, I just, you know, I want to say that you're not alone in that. When the idea that it was going to be complicated and verbose and in the ivory tower, that unfortunately is somewhat common. I come across that all the time when I meet people for the first time, of like their shoulders are up at their ears, they're really worried, but they're like, we got to get some data to report to our funders. I'm like, okay, but really in my head, I'm like, but actually I'm going to change the way you think about data and evaluation. So, okay. So, and also using the numbers and the stories are really powerful. You know, so often when I start working with an organization, I'll see that they're really focused on just the quantitative, just the numbers, or they're really focused on just telling stories, and they don't think telling stories are data, but they are. Stories are data. That's your qualitative data right there, right? But when you combine them under the same umbrella, like we're working towards getting families housed, and here are our numbers on how that's happening, and here are our stories on how that's happening, that makes a really compelling, holistic picture. You throw data visualization into that, and yeah, you've got people, you got their attention, right? Because, okay, back in the day, Kari probably remembers this, back in the day, there was like hundreds of pages for reports. The bigger the contract, the more money the contract, the longer the report that was expected to be. Lots of text, lots of tables, no data visualization, right? And a lot of ugly pie charts that made no sense. I agree with all of that. Thankfully, that has shifted. Their data visualization is huge within the evaluation community. I completely subscribe to that, that internally your data may still look a little messy in terms of it being tables and simple charts and things so you could talk about it internally. So internally, I think it's important, but once you're creating something that's going to be external, data visualization is such a critical part of making it user-friendly, of bringing people in, of really like, what is the point of this document? What do you want people to pay attention to? And then of course, align the colors and everything to your brand and all of those marketing principles, right? So it brings it all together so that people can really at a glance and understand what your program does and the difference you're making. And that's how program evaluation can really support showing the impact that you're making. And it sounds like have a phenomenal impact on the amount of money you can raise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just have a couple minutes before we're going to turn it over to questions. So if you have any questions about anything we've talked about today, please go ahead and pop those in the chat. I want to open it up to Fay and Brandi. What would you tell someone considering doing program evaluation? What would you tell them if they're like brand new, they don't understand it, they know they need to do it? What would you say?
Yeah, so I'll let Fay chime in too, but what I in my notes, what I put is number one, do program evaluation. Stay the course when you think it might be challenging, but just, keep going, get through your process, create your system, keep it simple. So we ended up getting a program evaluation database to keep track of all of our data in. It's called Apricot. And the consultant that we use to help us vet out this Apricot database has this sentence he always rings in my ears. Don't measure things that you're not going to use. Don't measure things you're not going to use. Do you need to know what their social security number is? What are you ever going to use that for? Do you need to know what their address is? What they really think about? Do you need this? How are you going to use it? And if you're not going to use it, then please don't collect it. Involve your entire staff, boards, clients, participants in the process. And then I think the last thing is more of like what to do with the data. I think one of the reasons that PHFS has been able to be successful is that we look at the data objectively and without an ego, and we're willing to admit to ourselves when things aren't working, and then when we need to iterate and pivot and try something different and try different strategies. And so if the data is showing that things aren't working and you're not meeting the outcomes that you expected to, don't take it personally that you didn't have, that was just your hypothesis, and we can just have a new hypothesis and try again, and really use that data to iterate in these ways and evolve your programs to best serve your people.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. And you hit on several things that are so important. One, only ask for things that you're going to use. But then also, what if the data show you're not meeting your goals, objective outcomes, whatever they are? And I think that's where I've had clients panic, nope, the data are wrong. We can't share this with anybody. You need to change it because your data are wrong. Nope, data aren't wrong, but maybe we could try a different plan. And actually what I work with people on doing is creating an improvement plan. Here's what the data show, the key finding, the challenge, right? And then what are you going to try differently? And then measure again and report it out again. So I love that idea of don't take it personally. It's not personal. It's just showing what you're doing right now isn't working. And don't you want to actually be meeting the goal to serve your clients in the way that you set out to, rather than ignoring this piece that clearly isn't working? So I commend you on being so honest and objective and really digging into oh yeah, if this isn't working, we gotta reassess and do something else. I think that's beautiful and a great thing for everybody to hear. So thank you. Fay, I wanted to open it up if you had anything else that you would like to share before we move on.
I mean, I agree with all of that. I think, when it's not working, it's a time to adjust programming. And so, I mean, we can't, the programming that we set up 5 years ago isn't going to, have the impact today than it did 5 years ago. So it gives us information on how we can develop program, how we can adjust program. I think creating, I am very much focused on hearing from the folks that we're serving. So I think as you're doing program development, create lots of opportunities, and it could be formal opportunities and it could be less formal opportunities to hear from the folks that we're serving. Because if we're not centering what their outcomes are or what they hope, like, then what are we doing, right? So I think, if it's conversational, if it's, I used to have kind of like a client council at a last position where they just knew I was going to be in a room on a Tuesday. I'd have coffee and they would come and tell me like, oh, we want to change this and we want this and we want, and it drove all the programming, because it was just like, oh, absolutely. Why are we doing this? So I just think let's, as much as you can kind of like reduce barriers from hearing specifically and directly from participants. The exit evaluations are great for some folks, but for some folks aren't going to sit and fill it out, and they're not going to, when you're moving and you have a lot going on in your life and you're, it's hard to like sit and think, oh yeah, I'm going to do that exit evaluation, I'm going to send it in. But if I can have conversations, if I can have follow-up calls, if we have this long-term relationship together, we can really, really hear from participants what the impact was right at exit, but also 6 months down the road, 12 months, I often hear from participants, I get to hear how their kids are doing. That is the best data I could have. And so I think we've really over-professionalized data for a long period of time. We've been scared of it. We've made it too complex. It hasn't been driven by the folks we serve or by staff or by our needs. And I think just kind of like, breaking down those barriers is really important and simplifying.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, this has been, I know we could talk a lot longer, but I want to leave time for some questions. And before we move to that, just a couple of quick things. I have created an interest form. The link is in the chat. I know Chari's putting it in there. And essentially the interest form is, I'm just interested to know what other topics you're interested in having trainings on, given everything that we've talked about today. So if you can even take a minute to fill that out during our Q&A time, that would be wonderful. And then our contact information is in the chat. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, Brandi's contact information. And Brandi was on OPB's Think Out Loud, and it is a fantastic interview. So if you have some time and can listen to that, I actually recommend you make the time. It's really wonderful. And you know what, Brandi, I'm going to turn it to you if you want to talk about this Solution Salon event coming up on March 15th.
Yeah, we have a solution salon on March 15th. It's something that we do quarterly at PHFS. It's an open invitation to the community. Everyone's invited to dive into the true root causes of homelessness, talk about what the causes are, talk about what the effects of homelessness are, and then talk about solutions. And at this one on March 15th, we're really going to dive into some of the solutions that are being thrown around the Portland Metro community right now, and really be thoughtful and critical about how the best way our community can and should move forward to address homelessness is. So it's going to be a really exciting conversation, and you all are invited.
Yeah, and that link is also in the chat if you want to go ahead and take that. And there'll be a follow-up email too that'll have all this information as well. So if you're scrambling to copy all of the links, don't worry, it's going to come out to you. The last thing is, I know this already came up, but my book, Nonprofit Program Evaluation Made Simple: Get Your Data, Show Your Impact, Improve Your Programs. You're welcome to check that out. It has a lot of what we talked about today. It goes through the process that I use to build a program evaluation system with an organization. So, and it's really geared towards nonprofit professionals or evaluators who are interested in a different way to do nonprofit program evaluation. And finally, I have a logic model workshop coming up on May 12th. I know that link is also going to go in the chat if you are interested and available. I'll be covering not just logic models, but also impact models, which is what I tend to do more often. And they're a variation of logic models. So you are welcome to sign up for that on May 12th. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Chari to facilitate questions.
All right, so feel free to verbally ask questions. One that came up was if you would be willing to share an example of an evaluation report. I don't know if you have one that you want to like screen share, or if they're, oh, it looks like Fay has a copy of the current participant exit evaluation.
And really, and we can, I'm not sure what you mean by evaluation report, but the annual report that the link is in the chat, that's really the way that we report our data. That's our main tool for showing our results to the community. Internally, it's the same information. It's literally like Chari said, you hit it right on, Chari. For us, internally, it's just like a 1-page with some Excel sheet rows and like numbers, and just it's all text and number based, but then we translate that into the infographics. And I saw a question in here about how do you create an infographic, and I'm going to give you like a hot tip. It's really easy. Our development director creates our annual report. She is not a trained graphic designer. She is a development director who has a good aesthetic and has taught herself by YouTube how to do all of this development, how to do this graphics design work. And so she just takes our spreadsheet of all of the, number of families housed, number of lengths of stay, percentage of families that got into housing, long-term housing retention, all the data that's there. She gets this Excel spreadsheet from Fay, and then she just puts it in the format that you see and finds little like free graphics online and just puts them next to it. I mean, it's so simple. It seems like infographic is some fancy thing, but it's like, she just puts a text box with the number and then she puts a graphic next to it. Boom, infographic.
I love that. That's fantastic.
And someone is also sharing that Canva is another option for those without like design backgrounds. And most versions of PowerPoint have icons within them that you can change colors. So you can change the color so it matches the branding of your organization. I think Noun Project is another, if you just put Noun Project into whichever search engine you use, that's another good option that I've used for icons. And others, feel free to share, but I think that's another really good like sort of TA live session that we could maybe ask around for folks and hold, because the wisdom of the community, and what I love that I'm hearing is like, you're just demystifying that like it doesn't have to be super, super complicated. I saw something that someone shared that they wish their students were here because you're making this so straightforward, plain talk about data from those we serve. And I just, I really want to call that out because I think that's what I'm hearing. There was a question that says, Brandi, it was fantastic to hear about staff engagement with data shared out on a quarterly basis. And I think, both Fay and Brandi, you really centered not just the people that you're serving, but your staff in a way that, I don't know, Chari, but I rarely hear from the people that we get to work with. And I think that comes through in the clarity of the language that you're using around your evaluation, and that trauma-informed is not just a buzzword, like you seem to embody it, and I think that comes through in the evaluation activities that you're doing in a way that I rarely hear. And this person's asking, since the original evaluation plan was created, have staff contributed to fine-tuning the way PHFS collects, manages, or analyzes its data?
Oh my goodness, have they? Yes, absolutely. So especially as we built out this Apricot database to track all of our work, the staff get in there. And I mean, it's not even like a formal process anymore. It's just like, as things come up, the staff just like make requests of like, here's what we need. Now we have this thing, we need to be able to track this. And so Fay has like these monthly meetings with our Apricot consultants. And we have been for like 3 years having these monthly meetings with our Apricot consultants where our staff are there too. Again, it's not just me and Fay. Like Fay and I are in these rooms. I don't even go to these rooms anymore. Now it's just Fay, but it's the staff. She brings the staff, and the staff tell the consultant directly what they need and what they're experiencing. And so, yes, I mean, it gets fine-tuned constantly. And then as we create new programs, we really, we do center our staff a lot. we believe that the people who are closest to the work are the experts in the work, and that they inform everything that we and I do, and that PHFS does. And so as we create new programs, the staff that are going to deliver that program are in that co-creation process. So I think about our prevention program. We didn't have a prevention program when we worked with Chari in 2013. We created it in 2017. And Samuel, the guy who does the prevention program, he was iterating every single step of the way. He starts out with like a here's the data I'm going to collect, and then it evolves like week by month over time. And so and he has built out the Apricot program as well for the prevention side. He's just always iterating how this data is captured and fine tuning and refining and getting new data points and just changing how it's being used. So absolutely all the time, constantly.
And that's honestly a model example of what it means to be an evaluative thinker. That's what you've cultivated there, Brandi and Fay. So it's just how you're talking about how the data is just, it's not a separate check it off the list, it's integrated into the program planning process.
And one of the most exciting things that I've been able to work on is this cash transfer program right now. So we didn't overcomplicate it. You know, we thought about what we wanted, what was our intention. We wanted to really work with folks who, you know, have been systematically and financially oppressed throughout our community. We wanted to look at people who are housed. And so they weren't looking at facing homelessness, but really couldn't make ends meet. We wanted to focus on single parents. We wanted to look at kind of our region's history of racism and white supremacy. And so kind of pulling back on what we wanted the impact to be, we decided, okay, we're going to partner with a culturally specific organization. We partnered with SEI. We said, we want to serve this amount of families. We want to look at this income range. We don't want the income range to be so low that this $575 cash transfer monthly is going to, you know, is the one thing that's, you know, paying their rent, but it's helping them make ends meet. And we wanted to look at single parents. And so we really kind of pulled back and really looked at like, where do we want to try to make this impact? That conversation really designed how we were going to model the program. And we've really simplified it. I mean, I just hear from folks, you know, I have a relationship with the 6 families. I hear about what's going on. I hear about their ability to move, their ability to go to school. One person's using it for their ability to work from home and get internet service. So, I mean, it just right from the beginning, we pulled back on what was the intention, where do we want, you know, the impact to be, develop the program, and then really we're tracking, you know, little things around housing status, you know, narratives about how the kids are doing, employment status. Every single one of the participants are either at school or employed, and it's been wonderful. And we're hoping that data we can absolutely replicate this really successful program. So it's been really fantastic.
And they're tracking things and asking the families questions like the amount of joy in their life, like how, like, are you experiencing joy, and how is, and so that we can see their answers over time and see if by having this cash and by not having to be so stressed and worried constantly about making your bills and you know, living paycheck to paycheck, like, does that increase your satisfaction in life and the amount of joy that you experience?
It's so interesting that joy versus satisfaction has a very different, oh my gosh, this is going to sound very Northwesty of me, but like that has a very different resonance. But you know, that just feels very different. Like when you hear that as an important indicator or outcome, you know, satisfaction is kind of like, okay, versus like, well, how's your joy?
Yeah.
You know.
And what I hear a lot from people is, oh, we do things that can't be measured. Nope, try me. I bet we can measure it. So you're measuring joy. And that's one I've heard a lot. How do you measure joy? You can measure joy. You can measure, you just got to sit down and then break it down into something, into a measurable piece. Yeah.
I saw, yeah, ask earlier, like the first question about any new things that we're doing, and what new frontiers we're exploring. And really this cash transfer is our new frontier, in finding ways like this joy, and finding ways to, I think what our ultimate goal is becoming at PHFS is really helping people move from this surviving to thriving. And so really being able to measure that and show that. And I think that's our big next data frontier. That's a cool question.
Yeah, that is a great question.
All right. Well, we're in the last couple minutes, and if anyone has, oh, I see Christine is mentioning seeking to increase human flourishing and not just reduce human suffering. It's such a powerful shift in thinking. Yeah.
I see a question from Alex about, are we using Apricot for our paperwork and electronic files? Yes, we use Apricot for almost everything. We have the Apricot accounts are linked to a Google Drive folder so that we upload like the things in the Google Drive folder. But then if you go to someone's Apricot page, you can like click their Google folder to get there easily and quickly. So it's we're trying to keep everything, because online and mobile, people do still fill out paper forms sometimes in the field, and then they take it home and they translate that from their paper onto the Apricot database.
That's fantastic.
Great, thank you for snagging that one. All right, well, we're just in the last couple minutes, and I just want to remind you all, make sure that you go back, if you have time, make time for Brandi's OPB Think Out Loud interview. And don't forget about the PHFS Solution Salon event, which is on March 15th. There is also Chari's upcoming Logic Model Workshop on May 12th. And one of 4, I believe, of the nonprofits that is featured in Chari's book. And it's a really easy read of a book. It's very approachable, which I think you're probably getting a sense of. And thank you so much for being here this morning to our panelists. If we were in person, I think you would be waves of gratitude and thunderous applause. But the wonderful thing about this is that we have people here from, I think I saw someone from Houston and from Bellingham and from all over. This was just wonderful to be able to have topic area experts as well as evaluators. You are incredibly inspiring in the way that you have talked about, the value that you put on learning, and that you really center the service in your work. And I just thank you, the 3 of you, for making time to be here, especially since what you're doing is so critically important for the people that you're serving. So thank you for transferring your learning to us and to our larger community. And thank you to Open for hosting this. And we really appreciate all of you for making time this morning out of your busy schedules to be part of this event this morning.
And thanks, Chari, to you for facilitating and representing Open. Really appreciate you being here too.
Of course. So be well all, and thank you for what you're doing to kind of connect us and continue to learn.
Everyone.
Everybody, have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ew.
Oh.